Hello, my name is Julie Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Identity Defined Security Alliance, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Our webinar is presented by IDSA member Banyan Security, Building Your IT Security Career by Taking Risks. Before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, so please make sure to share the link with your colleagues who were unable to attend today. You can submit questions through our panel for our panel, through the Q&A chat window. And lastly, we are now an approved ISC squared CPE submitter partner. So there's a link in the portal where you can provide your ISC squared member number, and we will submit your participation in this webinar on your behalf. So before I turn it over to our presenters today, a quick commercial for the Identity Defined Security Alliance. The IDSA is a nonprofit organization that facilitates community collaboration to help organizations reduce risk by providing education, best practices, and resources to implement identity-defined security. Our vendor membership is comprised of leading identity and security vendors and end-user contributors and companies. Our customer advisory board members provide guidance on our mission and represent the practitioner community. Check out the membership page on idsalliance.org for more information. All of our resources are freely available on our website. Check back frequently for the latest blogs, upcoming webinars, or sign up for our newsletter to get the latest info on Identity Management Day, which is coming up April 12th. So with that, let's get started. We have a great panel planned today. It will definitely not be your traditional career advice webinar. So now I'm going to turn it over to the moderator for today, Den Jones, who's a customer advisory board member and chief security officer at Banyan Security.
Thanks, Julie. And hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to try and keep this a little entertaining. One of my friends calls it wit and wisdom. So let's see if we can bring any of that to bear. And my friends on the panel today. So let's start with some introductions. Sarah, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Tenisi. I'm the CEO of Tenisi Tech, and we're a managed services provider for IT services focused on creating euphoria-inducing, sleep-tight assuring IT services for our clients by helping organizations define IT leadership, right? So things are, IT is not about fixing computers, right? It's about an overall security and productivity practice that we implement for our clients. Super excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. And Mr. Hanley, why don't you go up next?
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here with you today. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Hanley. I am the Chief Security Officer at GitHub. And prior to joining GitHub, I was the Chief Information Security Officer at Cisco. I joined Cisco when it acquired Duo Security in 2018 for about $2.5 billion. And prior to that, I was at the CERT Coordination Center at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. So a little bit of Fed, a little bit of startup, a little bit of big enterprise, now a platform. So great to be here today. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And Mr. Chase Cunningham, last but not least.
Yeah, so I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Ericom Software. We have got some stuff out there that does remote browser isolation, zero trust sort of things. I'm retired Navy, worked for the government for a long time after that, published a bunch of books and stuff. And then other than that, yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase. And thank you, everybody. So let's jump in. So this is all about career. I would love to start off with Chase. Why don't you share with us one of the first things that you learned in the early days of your career?
Well, I think for me, coming out of the military and the government space, it was really one of those things of, and I tell people that I mentor this all the time, is like figure it out. I came out of the military. I transferred from being a diesel mechanic in the Navy on board ships to CT work. And I went through a school, but the school was, nothing crazy amazing. It was a whole lot of figure it out. And on the back end of it, as I came into the civilian side, once I jumped from government work to civilian, I spent the majority of my time just observing other folks and asking questions and really trying to get in their head and figure out how they were doing things. And the value that you can get for your career from observing folks that are doing what you want to do and asking how they got there. That's how you figure it out, I think.
Mhm.
Awesome. Sarah, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Chase said. I mean, that's something, Den, you and I talked yesterday, and he asked, what's one of the things you can do? And I said, be resourceful. And that's one of our core values is you've got to know where to find the answers yourself. And you're right, Chase, if you observe people, you're resourceful and you're curious, probably is another really good one, then you will be able to kind of build your career in so many different areas of IT. I mean, I think the reality is, even at this point, IT is a relatively young industry. And I date myself by saying that when I was studying engineering at UC Santa Cruz, there was no MIS degree. And I left and went to Santa Clara University a couple years after that. And then, it was already at Santa Clara, but I think it came right after I left UC Santa Cruz. So it's a relatively new space, especially if you're talking about IT security.
Yeah, Mike, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the resourcefulness thing I think just really resonates with me, but I'd also say just having an openness to learning hard lessons, to failing, to learning from failure, to being feeling like you're not the smartest person in the room. Like these are actually good things. And I found at many points in my career, including my current role, being in a position where I'm surrounded by people who I feel like I have tons to learn from and can have healthy, open conversations with is, I think, just like a critical set of conditions to promote your own growth.
Yeah, it's never been hard for me to not look like the smartest person in
Me
the room.
either.
I mean, I just turn up and ask dumb questions all the time. The good thing is sometimes people don't know if it's a dumb question that I'm intentionally asking or whether I'm just dumb. So I'm kind of good either. I'm good either way. I'm like, you guys can figure it out. You're smarter than me. So yeah, and Chase, you mentioned something that actually, I should have started with, which is before you got into your career within the IT and security space, what was the thing that triggered you to get into that career to begin with? So do you want to jump like what was the one thing that happened to you where you're like, all right, shit, I need to go down this path?
Well, most folks can't trace their career change to a single moment. I can. It was when I was active duty and I was working on a piece of machinery that had a programmable logic controller, and it was an absolute piece of trash. It was never right, and the guys from Lockheed Martin had configured a bunch of the wrong settings. I didn't know a thing about IT and cyber and whatever else, but I knew that the laptop that the Lockheed guys had somehow fixed those numbers. I literally broke into my chief engineer's stateroom, stole the laptop, went down there, reconfigured the numbers, fixed it. And because it was acting right and actually working, just so happened that the guy that ran the crypto shop on my ship walked down and looked at me like an idiot standing there with this laptop doing illegal things. And I thought I was going to Leavenworth. I literally called my mom and said, Mom, I've done something bad. I'm going to Leavenworth. This is the end of my Navy career. I'm going to be wearing an orange jumpsuit. The next day, the crypto guy came down and he just goes, did you fix that piece of machinery? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, do you like doing mechanic work? And I said, I don't like checking oil. And he said, come with me. And then from there on, I just fell into cyber.
I love it. That is a
Awesome,
great story.
awesome. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to tinkering at home, right, which I'm sure many people do. I mean, there was a Zenith Heathkit was one of the first machines that I ever got to tinker with at home. Really, in like a professional setting, how I kind of pivoted from doing IT support into security was actually I had a co-op in college where I was working on an IT service desk, and I was fortunate to be around people who were willing to let me try new things and learn along the way. So. After I got some initial exposure to doing more security work and realized that this actually lined up quite well to the tinkering that I was doing at home, or that my brothers, my dad, and I would do with, the original Gateway 2000 and the Zenith Heathkits. And I remember having a party when we got the first Pentium, the 90 megahertz Pentium, way back in the day. That those things actually intersected quite well with like what I could do as a career. But like for me, starting in IT though, like in terms of a first real job other than like helping friends with websites and things like that on the side, was so important because you like when you're interacting with people when technology is not working correctly. And I like Chase's example, like you're going to get resourceful around like how to fix it. And most people are like just trying to get the job done, and they don't want to be stuck in the way of like process or technology impediments. it's like a really important thing, I think, to get crystallized early, is that technology, especially information technology, is there to help people get stuff done. And this really shaped a lot of like how I thought about approaching security, both in the earlier stages of my career and even today in my role at GitHub.
Yeah, and then Sarah, what about you? Actually, I got some things to share, but jump in first, please.
Yeah, I mean, I really, I was thinking as these guys were introducing themselves, for me, right? I'm an IT practitioner. And so security is like in every layer of our practice and what we do for our clients. And so for me, I think the security trick is about being able to articulate it to companies that need more of it, which is legitimately more than, I mean, everyone needs more. And so I think, figuring that out so that's kind of the security piece. I mean, getting into IT, I was an engineering student, knew I wasn't going to do engineering. It just wasn't the best fit. And so for me, it felt like a natural switch to IT, even though I maybe didn't understand it, like what exactly it was. And so I don't know, Den, if you know the story, but I just told people every job I got, I was an admin assistant. I said, I'm really technical. I should work in IT. And I happened to say it to the right person in the gym at Adobe. And she said, hey, it's really hard to hire. Why don't we make you a junior Unix sysadmin? And I was like, great, let's do it. And so that's kind of what kicked it off. I think most people don't grow up thinking I'm going to be in IT. I'm going to be a IT security professional. I think you fall into it a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting for me, right? So I was a postman, 17
Yeah.
years old, walking around the streets in Scotland, which I got to tell you, it's pretty shit. Not the job for me, right? But I'm also a musician, and I love music gear. And I just happened to be at my friend's house. This guy, and it's a shout out for this guy, Bruce Percy, right? He's now a photographer. So he was a Sun, worked at Sun, doing database admin work, I think. And I go to his house and he's got all this music gear, and I'm just like, how do you afford all this shit? And he's like, oh, I do IT.
Oh.
And I'm like, how do I do that? So I'm like, I didn't do IT because I wanted to do IT. I done IT because I wanted to buy music gear. Now I'm now surrounded by lots of music gear in my studio, so clearly it worked out fairly well. But instantly I'm like, how do I do that? And he's like, well, you go to college. Now the interesting thing is I left the post office and went to college. And my dad was like, oh, you're a stupid boy, you've just given up a job for life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
a job for life as a postman? Like,
Sounds terrible.
is that the job I wanted for the
I mean,
whole
for
of my
you.
life?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
not for me. I'm not a morning person either, so people didn't really get their mail until like late afternoon, when I was a postman. So now as you went through your careers, you guys have all shifted jobs um, fairly regularly. So what would you say was one of the key ingredients that made you successful as you were changing jobs and moving around? And Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me, and we touched on this at the beginning of the call, but I'll expand on it, is going into a new situation or a new role in learning and listening mode. And you've really got to like take the time to understand the business climate. Because as a chief security officer here, it's true that I run the security function, but I'm also here to help run the company that is GitHub, and understanding our product landscape, what our, it's talking to customers, talking to my peers in engineering, shadowing sales calls, talking to developers in open source, all of that stuff to really learn what are people expecting of us, what is the business need, and then how can I contribute, is a really, like, I think, just critical process of just, not making assumptions going in, being open to new ideas, being open to being wrong, being open to challenging things that worked for you in the last job that are not necessarily going to work in this job. That kind of discovery period, I think, is really critical. So there are a bunch of books on this topic. Like if you've read The First 90 Days, that's a great sort of playbook for going through a transition and an onboarding like that. But I also think it's important to remember that, you are in the job on day one. So I think it was my 9th day at GitHub that I had to burn all the active sessions on github.com. And that was a big, disruptive thing that we had to do in response to a vulnerability that we discovered, and, made some headlines that week. But, you need to be able to build trust with the people around you so that you can make the big calls early, but also, being careful not to run in like a bull in a china shop and then have people really like reject you and not be able to build trust with the team around you. It'll undermine your ability to create change.
Yeah, especially in the early days of any new job that you take on, right? You're really building trust from day one. So, and then talking about trust, Chase, Dr. Zero Trust, right? So one thing, it's funny, right? Um, so Chase and I have one thing in common. We're both in this what we'll call that zero trust marketing hype industry, right? So I'm curious, Chase. Other than stealing laptops and then reconfiguring and making things work, what was the best move you done or best thing you done is you changed into a new role?
Well, for me, it was, I mean, that the reason I've been so big in ZT is I sat on the other side of the equation as a red team sort of person and operator type thing in the government space. And when I really wrapped my head around sort of academically what that approach meant as far as removing the bad guy's ability to be successful, I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, like that makes so much sense. And I've always had this perspective personally, just that the chase of the pursuit of perfect defense. I don't know why I said it's so weird, but perfect defense is kind of dumb. Like you'll never be perfect, so why
Yeah.
continue to try that? It makes more sense for me, and I saw that as an opportunity to do something good. Like I'm a person that I need mission. I don't really money and all the other stuff, whatever, I could care less. That'll happen if I do the right thing. I need something I give a damn about. And if I believe in the mission and I believe in the approach, then I'll go at it whole hog and all the other cool stuff happens. And that for me was ZT. And I've just found it kind of works with my personality and the stuff I like to do. So, again, lucky idiot that gets blessed by other people's, cool stuff.
Yeah, and I got something I'll share later on that one. Sarah, what about you?
I mean, I think for me, it was a little bit planned, right? Like I worked in IT, I worked on a service desk, and I thought, okay. And it was a really, really small role because I was at Adobe. I was at a big company. So I got to do a tiny little piece of the puzzle. And then, I was pretty intentional about stepping into an IT leadership role. And so I think when transitioning, I think it is about listening. It is about understanding the key players. And for me, it's always been about asking customers what they need, whether that's internal customers or executive teams for companies that WageWorks was acquiring, to eventually asking Tennessee Tech customers, what is it that you need from IT? And a lot of times people can't articulate it. So I think it's really about trying to understand your customers' needs, as Mike said.
Awesome. Now, so just for those listening, we do have the ability for our audience to ask us questions. So please submit any questions you've got, and then we'll endeavor to get some smart answers, or we'll make some shit up. Either way. Now one thing. So while we're waiting on any questions, I got one for you guys. So as you go through your career, there's mentors and then there's mentoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with mentors. As you were junior in your career, what was the one piece of advice a mentor gave to you guys that you still live by today? Chase.
For me, it was a very good friend of mine that said, opportunity knocks, motivation kicks down the door. And I was like, I like that because opportunity is there. It's usually kind of ticking at the glass, and if you look around, there's plenty of opportunity. But when you finally get to it, I could have all the opportunity in front of me, but if I don't go get it, then what good is that opportunity? So kick the freaking door down and go do something with it. And to the other folks' point, like fail fast. If you fail, fine, but don't take it as a oh, this is the end of my life type thing. I'm going to go jump off a cliff. Like, no, I learned something. I'll go back and do it better next time.
Oh, awesome. What about you, Sarah?
I think it's really, for me, one of the pieces of advice was, and this is when I was transitioning from a technical role to a leadership role, was, this is a safe place to learn and to make those mistakes. So again, about being able to fail and come back from that. And so just being allowed to do that. And I think that there's been a lot of kind of transition in leadership styles from like maybe when I started to how we lead today. And so that was one of the things is, know that it's okay to make some mistakes. And then I think the other piece of advice I got early on in my IT leadership career was be transparent. Like when you make those mistakes, let people know you made the mistakes so we could fix them. And so that's something that I think is also really important when you're working in a field of, IT and IT security, is like, know how to explain what happened to the key stakeholders.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Mike, any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I think, just one thing is just to always be focused on like, what is the next right thing to do in any particular situation. And I think, like Dan, you're in a rapidly growing startup now. And I think like if you've been through a rapidly growing startup situation or hyper growth or whatever you want to label it, you know that like if you try to eat the whole elephant, you're going to choke, right? Like if you try to solve all the problems at once, or if you, if you can't scope things down into a manageable state so that you can do something that is incrementally correct, moves you forward, gives you an opportunity to like ship something and learn from it and then iterate on it. The worst thing that you can do is actually just be struggling with like the enormity of a problem. And like I've seen a lot of people just get like completely stuck down in mud and like unable to kind of break through that situation. And it just starts with like doing the next correct thing and moving your way forward through even the biggest problems.
Something that Mike just said triggered a thought in my head. And that was, what's really interesting about that. And this is, I think, a new way of leading too, is really understanding that done is better than perfect. So when you're staring at that elephant and you're trying to figure out how you're going to eat it, it's okay if you don't eat it perfectly right that first bite, right? You are going to learn along the way. And I think that was very transformational for our team. We had a speaker come, Vitaly Buford. I don't know her married name, but anyways, you can find her on LinkedIn. She talks about that all the time, is done is better than perfect. And so if you get, stuck in perfectionism, it's like game over, especially as you're changing careers.
Yeah. And I used to always say, I use the term that good enough so many times.
Good enough.
Especially with my Adobe team. And they're like, but Dan, is like the whole organization struggling to get around this good enough business. And they're like, does that mean that you're not shooting for like good quality? And I'm like, no, I want good quality and I want something to be robust and I want it to be safe. But the problem is when you shoot beyond good enough and you're going for perfection, and like Jay says, earlier, like don't shoot for perfection, right? Because perfection is this like arch enemy. It's all that, many people have said many things about it. The reality is though, is if you look across your whole security or your IT landscape, you will find so many areas that aren't good enough. So get things to good enough. And then, Mike and I, when we worked together at Cisco, we were always talking about but is it better than yesterday?
Better than yesterday. I love that. That's a great one.
Let's get it better than yesterday, and let's not get hung up on it's not perfect. Now, so loving, loving that we've all I think had some great mentors in our career, and hopefully that meant that you've become someone who, as a leader, is also mentoring other people. So let's talk about your mentorship as you're grooming new talent and others around you. So Sarah, can you share one piece of advice? Actually, I know we said earlier about the one thing we learned about being resourceful. So other than being resourceful, another piece of advice that you've given to young talent growing up.
I mean, I think that's got to be kind of what I just said, is it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay. Like you are not reaching for perfect. You're learning. You got to get there, and don't worry about being perfect. And I might not be perfect yet at this, but I'm trying to be great at allowing for those mistakes and that failure. I'm a lot better now than I was 5 years ago. And so that's part of what I'm trying to instill in new team members, and especially people new in the IT career. And I think that's one of the things, right? Look, an easy mistake could have a huge impact. So people have to be careful. But if something happens, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Let us know. Let's be transparent about it, and let's get the message across to our stakeholders.
Okay, and then awesome. And as we're going through answering this, one of the questions from our audience is really about suggestions that we've got for individual contributors that don't necessarily want to be management be managers in their career. So as you're thinking about how would you mentor somebody that doesn't want to be a manager, Mike, what would you share with them to help them grow their career?
Yeah, I worked with a very sage principal engineer in a past life who, when we were talking about sort of end of year performance, he said to me, one of the ways that you should measure my success as a principal engineer is not in the individual things that I do as somebody who's sort of super senior, but in actually the diffuse effects of how I make other people better engineers or enable their
Yes.
work or coach and grow their careers. And I thought this was like such a great perspective from a PE who's a superstar in their field, but also that like they primarily think about success as them being a lever to help elevate 10 engineers, 20 engineers, 30 engineers. So I think if you're on an IC trajectory, like the first thing to point out is like don't assume that your career has to move to management to make progress. Like you should do management because you want to do it and you love people management and leadership, not because you think it's the next step. And I think that's just like a important introspection and self-reflective thing to do, but also a conversation to have with your manager and with other people you trust. But I think when you're thinking about like a mentor, I mean, I look back at like the mentors who I've been fortunate to have in my career. I mean, just folks like Don Capelli, who I worked with at CERT, or John Stewart, who mentored me for a while at Cisco, or Doug Song at Duo, and John Oberhut at Duo. Like, just really fortunate to work with and around these great leaders. And you can feel a need to like be perfect all the time in their eyes so that you were like worthy of their mentorship. But just know that like a good mentor is never looking at you that way. They're trying to figure out how to help you, how to put you in positions where you can learn, where you can build on success and grow. So I think like looking for mentors, even if you're an IC, looking for senior engineers who you admire, who you look up to, who you think like model the behaviors and the results that you want to be able to exemplify in your own work. And just knowing that they're not expecting you to be perfect, but just like the being around or watching what they're doing and asking questions can be like a great opportunity for you to learn, independent of whether they're a manager or an IC.
Awesome. Chase, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I look at being a mentor as a sort of career achievement, like a blessing. Like I think I'm very lucky that somebody's willing to, put faith in me that I can help give them something useful in their career, because they're going to spend the rest of their life working on that. However, with my mentees, the folks that I do work with, I tell them all the time, start with why. Like if you're going to ask the questions about how and what and whatever else, we'll get to that later. Those are things we can figure out, and usually those are things that are probably pretty simple to figure out. But I want to know why. Like why are you asking this question? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to the business? Why is this of value? Why should you spend your time trying to do this thing? And on top of that, why is it worth me helping you go down this path? And if they can't answer that why, I send them back. I'll just be like, look, I appreciate your time. Thank you for the question. However, go figure out why.
Maybe to
Awesome.
Chase's point, like something that I've seen in the past is, and I think this is something that people kind of struggle with when they get to sort of the mid-senior levels of their career, is really being able to discern meaningful business results from activity. And,
Yeah.
like I see a lot of people who are busy at various points in my career and like doing lots of stuff and, feeling like approaching burnout because they're so swamped with stuff. But that stuff, maybe kind of back to Chase's point, isn't actually kind of moving the ball down the field in terms of like business or departmental objectives, and people don't really understand the context of that, and that can be a tough thing to discern. But I think finding a mentor who can help you figure out what things matter and why is pretty important.
And I
Yeah.
took a note just as you guys were talking, as Chase was talking, and I would say, look, if you're on the principal engineer example that you gave, Mike, that is somebody that was 100% aligned. Right. And so what I took a note on was you really need that alignment with team and business goals. So like when you're the smartest person technically in the room, right, you don't want to be just working, because it really is about that alignment, I think, when you're growing an individual contributor role. Because if you lose that alignment, then everybody's sitting around going, well, what's he do all day? He sits in his dark office like programming or whatever. But if you're aligned and you're helping other people, that's like a whole different story. And
Yeah.
so I would say get that alignment with your team and the business and really understand, like Chase said, the why. Why are we doing this? Why am I
Yeah.
spending 20 hours this week doing this? If there's not a good reason, it's probably not the right activity.
Awesome. And so another couple of good questions coming in from our audience. So one of the things I think we'll probably all experience is that there's a time in your life where you're in a current role and you're really trying to deal with complacency, right? So
Yes.
you kind of like it, maybe it starts to get a bit dry and boring and you're like, okay, shit, what's next, right? I got to think of that. So what do you think is the best way to deal with that when that starts to set in?
Do something, do something different. Like make yourself uncomfortable, make someone uncomfortable. If your complacency kills, and if you're sitting there around and just fat, dumb, and happy and sucking off the teat of the business you're at, you should question your integrity, because that's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
And B, go do one thing somehow that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, and watch what happens. That becomes more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like I've heard different companies be described as a country club, or oh, it's a bit of a country club. It's like, well, do something about it. Do
Right.
something. Mike and Sarah, so complacency. What would Mike? Let's start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like totally with Chase in terms of like, do something every day that is going to allow you to learn and add value and get better and challenge yourself. Like for me personally, the worst feeling in the world is to be comfortable, like, and feel like I've got it figured out. Like that is the strong sign that not only do I need to look at doing something else, but also that I may not be giving my best anymore in the role. And I think that's like a really important self-awareness thing to be able to detect when you're even in the ballpark of that state. But this is also like, you probably heard the concept of like having your own personal board of directors, or even this is like if you have a mentor that you talk to, and just telling them how you're feeling about stuff, what's working well, what you like, what you don't like about the job, can also help you sort of get a litmus test. Because I've had this conversation with mentors before, and they'd say like, sounds like you're getting a little too comfortable, and that can sometimes be the peer pressure that moves you in the right direction. So that would be a good one to think about.
Awesome, Sarah. Any thoughts, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the signs for me was always, could I have a couple of beers at lunch? And if I could, I was done in that role. And really what I realized, I mean, that's why I left places, right? What I realized is I'm a builder and I love delegating. So I like to build something. I like to show someone else how to do it so I never have to do it again. And I like to see it run. And so for me, if I get to a point in a role where I can take a step back and watch it run, it's probably time for the next thing. And so that's kind of how I always knew it was time to go.
Yeah, it's like if you're
Yeah.
uncomfortable in a way with the situation, like you're going to be on your toes, you're going to be thinking deeply about things, like reflecting, asking people questions, trying new experiments. And like, so I view that as like, it's a good place to be when you've got some of that discomfort or some of that uncertainty. And I think the fun thing is like, if you have clarity about like, what are you trying to do? Like, where are we trying to go? Like that can help you overcome all the uncertainty in the world. That makes the uncertainty actually like the desirable trait, right? Like I know I'm trying to go over here. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'll figure it out. That kind of lens on it is really what I enjoy.
Yeah, no, awesome. And then there was a second part to this person's question, which I'll actually take a stab at answering first, because this is in my wheelhouse, hands down. So, furthermore, the recommendation for someone looking to move out of the identity and access management space. Now, I will generalize it in a second, but moving out of one space to another space, for me, the identity and access management industry actually is so broad with so many facets to it that you have the ability to. I think there's a couple of things as you guys were talking. It's like, well, have a great conversation with leaders and those around you, and try and as you're getting complacent to say, hey, look, I'm interested to take on more challenges. What can I do? How can I help the business more? And try and do that. Only do that though if you're in a position where you're actually achieving the goals that you've already been set out to achieve, right? So
Big one.
don't ask for more if you're not doing the current crap. So if you're going to then move out or try and expand your horizons, right? You almost have to thoughtfully craft that move, but then work with your leadership and those around you to see how they can help you craft the move. Go back to transparency. I think it's vitally important in your career to have an honest conversation with your leader if you feel you can trust them enough to have that. And then in this case, identity and access management, well, there's privilege stuff, there's PKI and certificates, and there's all these other things. And then as Chase and I will tell you, well, hey, there's something called zero trust, right? You can jump in, and there's a lot of different areas there that you can get involved in and grow your career. So what any guys, any thoughts on that as you're trying to move from one thing out of what's probably considered a bit niche into another space? Mike.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I mean, like, I made me think about, like, what are you trying to get to? Like, what are some of your bigger career objectives, and how does each stop along the way kind of help you fill out that checkerboard of things that you want to be able to achieve or move you closer to your objective? So I think, like, for somebody who says, I want to eventually be a CISO, staying in like one lane and not learning other disciplines of security, not that you need to learn them all, because I think anybody who says they know them all is probably probably fibbing. But getting exposure to different lanes can help you look at different sets of problems, different sets of challenges, different sets of solutions, and just broaden your perspective, and expose you to different people as well along the way. I do think that can be helpful, like if you're thinking about you want to take on like a senior leadership position. But at the same time, like if you want to be deep in a particular vertical, and let's just say IAM is a vertical, which, I mean, it's a huge vertical in the security space, security and IT space, getting exposure to a lot of different systems, a lot of different tech, different contexts in which those tech can be implemented, I do think is helpful. Because one of the things that you have to watch out for is, like, if you're the person for a particular technologies change. And like we were just talking about zero trust a moment ago. And, I remember in the early days at Duo, when we were talking to Chase and his past life, like, look how much zero trust has evolved even since like 2016, right? And it's been around for a couple decades. Not everybody knew that until a few years ago. It's not a new concept, but just look at the last 6-7 years. Huge changes in that space. There are going to be huge changes in that space over the next 6-7 years. And I think staying up to date and, again, challenging what you know and keeping abreast of what's new and what people are trying that's different from what you know is a great way to just, continue to grow and get some breadth even in that own vertical.
Awesome. Chase, anything to add there?
No, he knows more about that space, and he's forgotten more about it than I'll ever know. So I couldn't answer any better.
Awesome. And well, I'll tell you one thing, Chase. So one of the questions, and then we'll start with you on this one, which is, there's knowing a deep technical stuff, and then there's knowing management. And so the reality is there's a bit of a balance as you go through your career. What advice do you have for someone who, I think maybe let's stick with the individual contributors, right? So I'm a technical person, but really there's a balance between technical and softer skills or business skills or knowing about security controls or compliance. What's your guidance for someone trying to navigate where that balance is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? So you need to polish or sharpen both sides of that sword. I mean, I'm literally sitting here this morning working on my updating, Cali stuff. Yeah, and it's not something particularly that I like really wanted to do, but I need to do it because my on keyboard skills suck right now. So you just have to kind of keep at it, and I think as you move to the different pieces in your career, there will be times where one side of that sword is more sharp than the other, and that's okay. But just take the time when you have the opportunity to sharpen the other side.
Awesome. Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think part of what's important when you're developing a career and moving from role to role is understanding that context in the bigger picture, right? Because generally people are either big picture people or in the weeds, right? You can have both skill sets, but you're going to focus on one or the other. And I think when you're moving careers or moving even just aspects within that same career, I think it's really important to understand the context and the impact. Right? If you're a practitioner, it's a little bit easier to understand your impact to like an end user. Like I really think in end user terms. So what is your work doing as part of the bigger picture? And I think that will help guide where you're going and what you're trying to do. And I think, again, that alignment is really important. And you really get to look to your leaders for that alignment.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And it's interesting because I look at it like I've gone through a career, I've changed jobs, all the time. And in some cases, as an individual contributor, the thing that set me apart from those around me. So if you can think of a team that blends really well, I would always tell people, look within your team and look at what sets you apart from others in your team. It's not, I'm not trying to say it's a competition, but maybe your skill is not as technical as your peer, but maybe one thing you're really good at is talking with customers. Maybe you're really good at engaging with the business. And if
Yep.
you bring the whole sum of the parts together as a team, then where can your strengths be used to benefit the team? And where can you depend on strengths of your peers where you recognize, that's maybe not your best strength. And that for me, I lived by that a lot. And I realized early on, I'm not the sharpest technical person, but where I was really good was kind of delivering a result really quickly, and I don't know what the difference was, but I wasn't getting involved in details that would slow you down, but wouldn't really benefit or change the outcome. So for
Exactly.
me, I was always like, let's think of that. Um, Now, there was a couple of things, but one question in here is brilliant: skills gap. So there's a big problem in the industry, whether it's IT or security, and we're churning out people from the schools, colleges, and universities, but from a jobs perspective, when you go to apply for jobs, there's even a problem trying to get jobs filled, and there's a problem with people trying to find jobs that they're really interested to take on. So what do you think companies should do differently or could do better in order to try and close this gap? Mike,
I,
let's start. Or
um,
Sarah. Sarah,
well,
you're high.
we're hiring all the time, literally constant hiring at Tennessee Tech, but really even when you're just growing a team. And what's really interesting is the stuff that people use in college and learn in college, right? Fundamentals, conceptually really important, but not usually what you're actually going to do day to day. So when we're hiring somebody new, we're really looking again, are you resourceful? Are you curious? Are you driven? Those are, more of our corporate values. We're really looking at those types of things because we know that if you're the right fit personally, then you'll develop those technical skills in areas that you're really interested in. And I think like IT and is one of those careers where everything you need to know is out there. So
Yeah.
you've got to really figure out what that is. And the other thing I would say is, be careful when you're looking for a job to not ask for compensation packages that are crazy when you have a year experience. I think that's really important. I think that the market's really interesting right now from that perspective, and really know the real true value of what you're doing for your company.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in expectations these days. Mike,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, in terms of what companies can do differently, if every job description that you publish says you need 15 years of experience
True.
auditing cryptographic functions and software, like you're gonna dramatically limit your pool of qualified candidates, like and unnecessarily so, frankly. And
Totally.
I think it's healthy to have a distribution of background, skill sets, experience, et cetera, within the team, because you end up building these natural dynamics of, you have senior people coaching and mentoring junior people. You have junior people who might stay in your team and do 3, 4, 5 different jobs during their time at the company, which can be an exciting, like, developmental thing to have happen for junior employees in particular. So I think, like, many job descriptions, I think, are written remarkably poorly. I
Yes.
mean, the joke that I see sometimes is like, must have 15 years with Web3 technologies to work on this NFT project, right? And it's like, I mean, it's funny, but it's also not that different from what's actually happening in reality, I think, in some segments of the job market. So I think just like being open to and recruiting for earlier in career talent, and like breaking outside the mold of like, well, I'm just going to go set up a booth at DEF CON and Black Hat and hire people at those two conferences or RSA. There's nothing wrong with hiring people from there, but if that's your whole strategy, like you're actually going to get into a pretty predictable pattern of like what you're going to hire, because you're going to attract an experienced set of industry folks who have probably been going there for a long time. again, that's fine. It's probably not your sole strategy. And I think you really need to go out and look for like, where are the places that have like, I'm just giving you an example. What are some of the community college accredited programs where you may have veterans who are coming out of service, like Chase's example, veterans who are coming out of services, doing a job retraining program, actually have a ton of experience and are now getting a new skill set. Like they'll probably come in and hustle pretty hard in your teams and probably develop really quickly, or going and looking at schools that have novel, like multidisciplinary programs that could benefit your team and your strategy. I just think we've got to get more creative as leaders and as hiring managers, especially when we're building big teams and programs. Like I've tripled the size of the team here at GitHub just in the last year, which has been a big effort. Like you can't just rely on the job site or go into one or two of your favorite conferences. Like you really got to have a diverse range of strategies if you want a diverse range of outcomes in terms of sourcing and hiring inside the team.
Awesome. Chase, any thoughts as we wrap this one up?
I mean, potentially unpopular opinion here, but I fundamentally vehemently oppose the whole certification shenanigans that we put into this space, because I think it's crap. I think we've created a self-licking ice cream cone of misery where we continue to tell people you have to be certified. And then then I can go sit in my house for the next 6 weeks and study, and I get certified. And when I go do the work, they say, okay, here's the thing, go do it. And I go, I've never done that. So, and we boil off people because they don't have alphabet soup after their name. And most of the certs, and this is why when I go to RSA, I always like keep an eye on my back because I'm going to get knifed one day. But like most of the certs that are out there are absolute BS, and they're only good for creating money for the certification organizations. So go get your certs if you're trying to do things and learn stuff. However, for the people trying to get a job, we shouldn't be evaluating people based on that, and we shouldn't have criteria that say from on high, thou shalt be certified in X to get said job.
Yeah. No, that's
100%
awesome.
agree.
Yeah.
Me too.
And it's funny that that nails off one of the other questions that someone had posted in there about certifications on the IAM field. And I think the reality for me was companies, rather than posting for all their wish list of stuff, I look at it like, why aren't we hiring for, and Chase, you said this earlier, I want hungry people willing to learn. I want people I can trust. I want people that's going to actually want to go the extra mile, and they're inquisitive. And Sarah, you said curious, right? So it's almost like I want a job description that says, hey, are you a technologist, but you're also hungry?
Yeah.
Because at the end
And we're
of the
not
day,
programmers. We're not all freaking programmers.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing. I learned this early on when I moved to the US. I was hanging out with a team of people, and they're like, "Oh, I'm an MCSE, and I'm a this, and I'm a that," and I'm like, "And I'm a don't give a shit, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you're the crap Windows admin because all you're doing is putting more memory in the server. Like, you're not solving why the server's crashing. You're like, yeah, but the book says." And so I'm with you guys on that one, and it's funny. Right, one rapid question as we kind of wrap up. So, okay, so this is a good one, right? So, in your view, what's easier in life, gain someone's trust or to win someone's love, and answer in the context of IT, ideally. So, Chase, I'm going to start with you. Is it trust or love?
Could there possibly be a worse question? I mean, I think it's I mean, I think it's I would say it's probably more difficult to win someone's trust, real trust, than to get someone's affection.
True.
That's the only thing I can possibly say that sounds somewhat intelligent in response to that.
Mike.
I mean, I agree with Chase. You know, the thing I'd maybe add to that would be it's pretty easy to lose and not recover trust. I think, like, especially royally in the security and IT space,
Yes.
it's pretty hard to recover, especially from a lack of transparency. And trust and reputation, I think, are everything. And if you don't invest meaningfully in building those, especially when it means doing hard things, you're going to have a bad time.
I would say, look, it's action and results breed trust. And so you've got to be somebody that follows up. You've got to be able to be somebody that takes action and shows results to earn that trust. And that's why it's harder, because there's actually work involved in gaining someone's trust.
So I think then the panel is going with, it's probably easier to win someone's love. It's probably a short term gain, but the real harder thing and the best gain is to earn someone's trust. It's harder to do it, but if you get people that trust you and you demonstrate that, then eventually, hey, they might love you too. And I think in the reality, IT, Sarah and I were talking yesterday and stuff, and we're like, yeah, you remember like in an engineering company, they would have like the people that serve them lunch here, and then the people in the do the cleaning here, and then IT's down here. In the pecking order of their love for people in the company of an engineering company, IT is kind of like low down there. And I think for me, it was always a desire to build trust and relationships and partnership with the people we're working with. And in turn, I'm not trying to win someone's love. What you're really trying to do is actually earn their trust and respect. And I think for me, that was always important.
I don't know. I love the people that bring me food. So
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's
True.
that's the thing, right? So DoorDash, like maybe we love those people
I
more
was
than
just
the
saying,
IT.
you want love and affection, it's through the belly.
Yeah. So we like the DoorDash delivery drivers more than the DoorDash IT team. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's it. So hey, folks. First of all, thank you very much for your time. I do know that Sarah, someone's really asking questions about an IT company, MSSP, and how do they get experience in the IM field. So it's possibly the same person with the IM question before. I would maybe recommend, maybe on LinkedIn they connect with you, and maybe sounds like they're looking for a job. I don't know.
More than
Um,
happy to have those
yeah,
conversations with people and act as a sounding board for sure.
awesome. So as we wrap up, so Sarah, people that might be interested to get to know more about Tanisi Tech, how can they find you? How can they find out about your company?
TanisitTech.com. We're on LinkedIn. I have a podcast called Tech Me Seriously. You can go to techmeseriously.com. I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn. And,
Awesome.
of course, there's contact forms on our website as well.
Cool. Chase, what about you?
Yep, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. I do another terrible podcast, Dr. Zero Trust. I do LinkedIn live streams on Wednesdays, and if you have a question or if there's something I can help you out with, I will jump through hoops to do it.
Awesome. Mike Hanley, what about you?
Yep, you can find me on GitHub or on LinkedIn, and we're hiring. I got dozens of positions open across the security team at GitHub. So if you're interested in learning more or checking us out, just go to github.com/careers.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And then thank you, everybody. I'm Ben Jones, CSO at Banyan Security. You can reach us at banyansecurity.io. And like Chase and Sarah, I also have a dodgy podcast. We call it Get It Started, Get It Done. So you'll find that I'm the gracious host. Believe it or not, Sarah is the guest this month, and then Chase is going to be a future guest. And just for shits and giggles, we'll probably get Mike back on just to hear how he's doing as well. And then as I wrap up today, thank you very much to the IDSA for putting this together and having such a fun team on the panel. If you want to learn more about the IDSA, you could go to idsalliance.org. And then a shout out for Identity Management Day, which is coming on April the 12th. So anything related to identity management and for all those IAM questions out there, that's a day to pay attention to. There'll be some fun stuff going on there. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and paying attention. And hopefully you're all still awake. Take it easy. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.